I hear you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Al Filreis, and I'm from Pennsylvania, but I'm not in Pennsylvania, and I'm not running for Senate, and I'm not running for governor.
That's good.
I'm not even running for teacher. I'm running for convener, host. I don't even want to be a teacher. I just want to be a convener now. That's what I am. And so I'm so glad to be here at the Morgan. And we are so, so grateful to our pals at the Morgan. I want to shout them out. Sal Robinson, Annie Gamez, and Eileen Curran, who helped us arrange this really special night where a whole bunch of Modpo people invaded the place. Must be about 40 or 50 people in here. Invaded the place. I won't say invaded. The guards may come and get us. But, you know, we're temporarily occupied. No. We're residing here for the evening to talk about poetry, and we're so grateful to the people at the Morgan. So thanks to them. We have Zach and Chris here. Now, the audience already applauded them before we went on the air, but now they're going to have to do it again because the people watching from a distance are going to have to know that there's an audience here. So here is Chris Martin on audio. And the inimitable Zach Gardner on video. And it looks like he's on audio as well right now. But we have two cameras. We have a third camera here that everybody's complaining about. We have another oh, wow. This is really crazy. So this is our road gear. And we just slept to Chicago and back in the road gear. They did. Actually, they drove. We flew, right? How did they do it? Look at this stuff. Somebody said it's like an artwork. Anyway, Lainey Brown is here. Hello, Lainey.
Hello.
Are you going to talk right close into the mic the way we're supposed to?
I'm going to talk right into the mic.
Hello. And Sophia DeRose is here.
Hi.
And this is your first Morgan Webcast.
Yeah, have you done one here before?
Yes, we have.
And yes, before my time.
Actually, week 8, we did it. And there's Allie Castleman, the great, famous founder TA. Allie Castleman. Hi, Allie. Yes, there's applause for Allie. Okay. And we have, can I see the Zoom, Zach? Is that how it's going to work for me? Zach is running around. We have TAs here from all over the place. We have Kate coming to us from Providence. Hi, Kate. We have Gabby from Chicago. We have Jake from Los Angeles. We have Dave from Arizona. I say Arizona. Should I say Tucson? Phoenix? Tucson. Sorry. And Erica Kaufman from the Hudson Valley. And we have Jason from, I believe, South Jersey. Jason's going to have to cut out after a little while because he's doing something for Fence. Very exciting. And we have some fabulous people in the audience you're going to get to see. So what we're going to do now is we're going to assign to various members of the team a coverage of comments and questions being posted. So who wants to do Twitter, Sophia? Twitter, Sophia. Okay. You're going to be tweeting, not you guys. I hope not. You can if you want. I mean, but you're going to be tweeting at #ModPoLive. The discussion forums, Dave, would you be willing to do that? Yes, Dave is nodding. Okay, so for those of you watching through YouTube, the discussion forum is under live webcasts, and then you go there, and it's really easy to find. It's the main pinned thread, and then we have the YouTube chat, which what did we decide to call that? Comment feed, chat. Chat. Okay. Sophia said that without any irony at all. Like, okay, boomer, it's called chat. Who wants to do that? Who's been doing that? Has Gabby done that yet? Jake and Gabby. How about that? Okay, great. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go around to everybody on the team. We're going to also ask a couple people in this distinguished audience to pick a poem from this week's syllabus. It's hard for those of you who don't even know what the syllabus is. It's even harder for people who don't even know what a syllabus is, but that's okay. Jonah's like catching up really quickly. Jonah, when were you my student? You'll have to shout because we don't have a mic for you. 2002, so it's been 20 years. Good to see you. First time in 20 years? Wow. How's it feel? It's great to be back. Okay. So we're going to ask a couple of people you don't know who you are just to shout out a favorite poem of the week. And your job is to say which poem and why. And I'll take some notes, and so will Lainey probably, and then we'll decide which one to talk about. Actually, you know what? Why don't we ask Shantine, you can pick, of all the ones that are mentioned, you can pick the one that you think we should start talking about. Okay? All right, so let us start with Sophia DeRose. Pick one and explain why.
Well, yesterday in our class when we did this, I said Sleeping with the Dictionary by Harriet Mullen because I appreciated how it kind of showed this process of learning what's inside words before we know what words themselves mean and contain. But this time around, I'm going to go with Broken English by Erica Hunt for the same reason.
Wow, that was a little curveball there. And there was a mention of our students. We actually are teaching this class in a 4-credit face-to-face situation. Can you imagine that? How old-fashioned of us. And in fact, it's so fun that 4 of the people from that class are here. So they came from Philly to New York. It's a little counterintuitive. I think I'll go to New York to watch a webcast of a class that I meet with already in Philadelphia and pay a lot of money for it 2 times a week, but I'm going to go to New York. It's weird. Everything is all mixed up in this era. Lucas is here. Raise your hand, Lucas. Hello. William is here. Ted is here. And Emma is here with the mic. Great. Okay, that was the first suggestion. Great. Allie?
I'm going to go with In a Restless World Like This Is.
Charles Bernstein.
Well, okay. Because I think it's a really nice bridge between week 7 and week 8. And I know we were talking about it a bit in last week's webcast, and we had a really great discussion about it. I think last time we were at the Morgan. Yeah, just a really, really lovely poem.
Fantastic. Good suggestion. Let's go to Kate, and Lainey will be on deck.
Well, I'm hard pressed to pick a favorite, but I was struck today reading My Emily Dickinson, which I've been reading for 20, maybe 25 years, just by how fresh it remains, how beautiful and apt her descriptions are. And just to call out a few things, passage number 2 really always gets me. And her description of Stein, where she says, she reached in words for new vision formed from the process of naming, as if a first woman were sounding, not describing, space of time filled with moving. And
As
it
if
just
the first woman were sounding, not describing. Yeah.
space of time filled with moving. It just every time it hits Stein's nail on the head for me.
Kate, can I ask you a question? We're breaking a little pattern here. Lainey, you'll be on deck. But a quick question, if you don't mind trying for a quick answer. We put Susan Howe in this week. She is affiliated somewhat generationally, but mostly ideationally with her colleagues in this week. And she has been very close to some of the people, especially on the New York side of the language poetry group. And we chose My Emily Dickinson, which is a book of critical prose, for this week in the main syllabus. It's kind of an odd choice. Can you explain why it does fit?
Well, I think it fits in the context of her oeuvre, which is so various. I mean, she writes these long prose explorations of others' work and historical American characters like Jonathan Edwards, who she keeps coming back to and coming back to. But then she'll also write these very spare pieces or little almost found texts from news sources. She's always reaching at the same people, the same characters, the same subjects, the same undercurrents of American history, but through these various forms. And one of the ways she often does that is with prose. And sometimes she'll reiterate herself or paraphrase herself within different forms. She does that in The Midnight, where she shifts between prose and poetry and not found text, but quoted text. So I just think My Emily Dickinson is emblematic of her searching work.
Thank you, Kate. That's one big reason why she's here in week 8 of ModPo. There's another reason, and that has to do with the fact that we begin the course with Emily Dickinson as a radical poet, and this is a way of bringing it back. And it's not just the Dickinson that we may or may not have gotten in week 1. It is the Dickinson that the week 8 poets are interested in. It's my Emily Dickinson, or their Emily Dickinson. Okay, thank you so much. Lainey is up, and Gabby is on deck.
So Kate mentioned Stein, and yesterday after class, I was talking with William and Jenny about what's the connection between Stein and the language poets, and we started talking about Lynn Hygenian. So a pause arose, something on paper. That idea of writing a life in such a different way that she created through my life is just, it's every time I read it, it still blows my mind away.
Fabulous suggestion. Shantine, are you keeping track of all this somehow? Okay, good. All right, so Gabby's up and Jake is on deck.
Yeah, I'm going to go with kind of a classic, and actually that is getting a bit of shouting out in the YouTube chat, which is My Life by Lynn and Ginny. And I just think it's so beautiful and never really gets old to me. It's really good.
Great suggestion. Jake is up. Dave Poplar on deck.
Well, I want to echo Kate here. I too love Susan Howe's My Emily Dickinson. Like, to me, it's just the North Star of writing in a meaningful way about the works of others in a personal way, and in a way that's poetic and free, and also really super thoughtful. But also, I want to say that Bob Perelman's Confession poem Aliens
from
have
Modpo
inhabited
Plus.
Yeah, from Modpo Plus. Aliens have inhabited my aesthetics since the 70s. Uh, I mean, to me, it's I don't know. I hate the word relatable in poetry context or language is poetry context especially, but I just love it. It's so funny. Me too. Aliens have inhabited my aesthetics also.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jake. Dave Poplar is up. And how about if Emma W., who is holding the mic herself, go next? Pick a favorite. Okay. Dave?
Something from Modpo Plus, another Charles Bernstein poem in particular. Uh, I I like this for a lot of reasons. It's funny. I mean, it begins each line with a racial or a cultural characterization, and then has a description after it, and it sort of forces us to, reckon with the unstated assumptions that we have, the stereotypes we have about these cultural assumptions, and ultimately, it makes us think how these descriptions might be incongruous, and how these stereotypes may ultimately be, not just silly, but kind of obstacles to really understanding what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff about this, and it's funny.
Thank you. And that is in the Charles Bernstein section of Modpo Plus. Let's turn to Emma with Jason on deck.
I think I have to go with Chronic Meanings.
Bob Perlman.
Yeah, we talked about that one yesterday in the brick and mortar Modpo, and I just...
How lovely to be the brick and mortar Modpo. Say that 5 times fast.
And I just can't think of I won't say it. I can't think of a more powerful way to commemorate the life of someone who died in such an unfair way. Yeah, it breaks my heart every time I've read it in the last week.
It's a pre-elegy for Lee Hickman, and it constrains itself to 5 words in each line, and each sentence, each line is cut off, and it gives you this constant sense of a thought, a life being cut off. So kind of a classic example, or maybe one of the best examples, of how form, especially experimental form, becomes more important than content, because the content is just a bunch of relatively random things that one could say that get cut off. Thank you, Emma, for that suggestion. Jason is up, and Erica is on deck.
Hey, I think that one poem that really stood out to me first as a good entry poem, I think, into the language poets, and is Charles Bernstein's from Modpo Plus, "As if the trees by their very roots had hold of us."
Wow.
Which I'm just fascinated by the title, thinking about Some Trees by John Ashbery, and this poem is really a poem about time and temporality, and is kind of twisting and folding any sort of sense of linear time. And I think I noticed this week by focusing on this poem is how many of the poems this week are dealing with language and time in some sort of way, like especially something like My Life.
My Life, certainly, yeah. Great suggestion. Thank you, Jason. Before we turn to Erica, I want to invite everybody who's watching on YouTube and who are participating in the forum discussion and Twitter just to vote for your favorite of the week. Just let's get it out there. And in a minute, we'll ask Jake and Gabby in particular to check the YouTube to see what suggestions are being made around the world. Okay, Erica, your thought on this?
So for Modpo Plus, and building on what Jason was just saying, thinking about language and time and adding perspective to that equation, I love Leslie Scalapino's coming sequence, and the Tyrone Williams from the main syllabus.
Yeah.
Particularly written by himself.
Himself, yeah.
And what those 2 poems are doing is they're kind of asking us to question the way the eye moves in time and space, and the accuracy of perspective and representation.
Perfect. And that moving eye is, of course, a hallmark of the language school, certainly at the beginning. Very cool. Leanne Brown, do you have you don't have the syllabus in front of you, but I would like to invite you to sit here and respond. And now we're going to turn to Shantine. Hey, buddy, we need to get the mic to Shantine. Can you do that? Just toss it. Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
So you were in ModPo for the first time last year.
Yes.
How was that?
It was amazing. Fun.
We so enjoyed getting to know you. That was really fun.
Me too.
And now you're a big-time graduate student again.
Again. This time is much more pleasant.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, we had a lot of conversations about the previous unpleasant stint. Anyway, you know this week from last year. So what do you think? Which one should we talk about first?
I hate to be basic, but I think we should start with my life.
My life. That's perfect. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a section of my life. Actually, it's this one that I'm going to play. I'm going to play Lynn Haginian in 1979, reading a section of my life. It's the section that begins, "It was a mountain creek." If you don't have it in front of you, don't worry. You can hear Lynn. This is a youngish Lynn, reading it. And actually, the poem hadn't been published yet, as far as I know. And so she's just trying it out on an audience. Let me see where they were, at San Francisco State University. So, Chris, are you ready for this? This is a challenge for Chris. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, to those people tuning in, you can call 610-616-3208. 610-616-3208. You can call us, or you can Skype from overseas if you want. ModPo Pen. Pen is 2 N's. Please do give us a call. Chris, you actually can handle that? Call just to test Chris. 610-616-3208. And before we turn to Lynn's audio, let's see. It's, I believe, Jake and Gabby looking at YouTube. What did they say in there, Jake, Gabby?
Well, Tinder, best adult dating site. It's definitely big hearts.
What?
That's big. It's seconded even. There are 2 statements in that direction. Clearly spam though. But other than that, I did see my life mentioned a few times, and Perlman's Chronic poem too.
Okay, good. Gabby, did you see something? Oh, yeah, we're looking at the Tinder has invaded.
Yeah, that's a weird spam bot that we get on YouTube. It's unavoidable. We actually also got a couple of people shouting out the Emily Dickinson poem that is central to the Susan Howe that we excerpt. My life
had stood a loaded gun. Boy, oh boy.
So that's sort of a wild card choice. But yes, we've got some Lynn Haginians, some Chronic meetings, and an Erica Hunt vote from Sanjeev.
Great. All right, so here we go. We're going to listen to a little bit of Lynn, and then I'm going to ask a few people to respond. I'm going to ask Leanne and Allie and Jake and Erica to respond in any way you like to what you hear. Here goes Lynn Haginian.
The obvious analogy is with music. It was a mountain creek running over little pebbles of white quartz and mica. Let's say that every possibility waits. Nothing could interrupt those given days. My grandfather was as serious as any general before any battle, though he had been too young for the first war and too old for the second. He carried not a cane but a walking stick, and was silent on his walks except when he passed a neighbor. And then he tipped his hat and said morning if it were before noon, or evening if it were afternoon, without pausing in his walk, just as nowadays joggers will come to a stoplight and continue to jog in place so as not to break their stride. Then the tantrum broke out, blue, without a breath of air. I lifted the ice cream to make certain no spider was webbed in the cone. Sculpture is the worst possible craft for them to attempt. You could increase the height by making lateral additions and building over them a sequence of steps, leaving tunnels or windows between the blocks, and I did. The shape of who's to come. It should be completed only in the act of being used. While my mother shopped, I stood in produce and ate raw peas. The lovely music of the German violin.
We heard part of it, and it's an earlier version than the one we study. And so I would like Allie to just say what's going on in your head when you're listening to Lynn Haginian read this piece about her girlhood. I believe this would be maybe her 4th or 5th year of life.
Well, actually, one of the main things I was thinking about just now is the act of revision. Because I'm so used to coming to this text as finished and as itself. And I think Shantine used the word basic, which I think just means like foundational to our understanding of this week in ModPo. And so it's really kind of amazing and refreshing to hear a version of it in progress and process. And just think about, you know, like what was potentially going through her mind as she was making those additions later on. Because I think it's easy to think of work that you've read over and over again and come back to as just kind of like given as there, but it's not, it's created.
Yeah. And one of the lines that's missing in this version, but added a little later in the edition that we use, is between, but nothing could interrupt those given days. And then that whole long piece, probably the longest sentence in the whole book, about her grandfather and the way he walked, very sort of stately, gentlemanly, old-fashioned kind of guy in the neighborhood. And in between was an I sentence. I was sipping Shirley Temples, wearing my Mary Janes, which is a real girlhood sentence. So I turn to Leanne Brown. What are your thoughts about what we heard or what we're reading here?
Well, I always think of this text as an exemplar of her rejection of closure, and I picture it as an accordion that opens like this, and it inserts between each pleat. Like when I first heard of the concept rejection of closure, I thought it meant you didn't have to end it. And I always have trouble with endings of poems or manuscripts or relationships. And I was like, oh, good, I can reject closure. But then what she's doing is it goes in the middle. It becomes larger.
The rejection of closure is throughout.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Emma, could you give William the mic? And William, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to follow up on that rejection of closure. I mean, as a young person, you're very involved in composition and music. What would it mean to be instructed by an artist of an older generation saying to you, we need a rejection of closure in order to accomplish X or Y or Z? And for you, in a minute, I'm going to ask you, what would the X or Y or Z be? What are some advantages that can be derived from what Lynn Haginian did in this experimental autobiography? Thank you, Leanne. William, in advance, thank you. Jake, can we turn to you, and then Erica?
Yeah, just to continue with the rejection of closure, or in the spirit of it, I'll instead of an observation, I'll share a question that I had as I was listening to the recording, and it's striking, I think, because when I'm reading the text itself, I feel like there are these huge turns between sentences, or like so much happens in that turn from one sentence to the next. And I read that book very slowly, but here listening, just it being read with such ease, it was a very striking and different kind of experience. And what occurred to me is like this deadpan quality of the performance of this text, and I feel like I've encountered it in the works of other language poets, and I'm curious. Why is the deadpan quality important, and what does it mean in the context of language poets?
That's a really great question, and I'm hoping that people will want to answer it. I want to turn to William on the question of the rejection of closure and some advantages we can derive from it. But let's leave that question hanging in the air, the one that Jake just asked. I mean, my stab at that would be the paratactic quality, the non-subordinated quality of one sentence coming from one place of that year in a memory and another sentence coming from somewhere else. And so everything has got to be equal, an equal memory, and nothing is a greater memory, more traumatic or less traumatic than the other. And therefore, the best voice for it is unmodulated. I mean, I see a memory of some kind of fear and trauma in these early ones. There's a whole question of I was an object of time filled with dread. I lifted the ice cream to make certain no spider was webbed in the cone. That's such a distinct childhood thing to say, but it's also, there's a fear everywhere. There's a lot of fear she throws up when she goes to school. I don't know if it's in this section or another one. And so I think that's another way of saying, I don't want that to be the loudest and most dramatic when I read it moment. I want everything in that year to have contributed to that girlhood fear. All right, let's go to William and then to Erica on this, and then we'll switch to another poem.
Hi.
Hi, William. How are you?
Good. To I guess dig into the composition analogy. I think of how there's some compositional works that try to like blend the environment of the performance into the piece itself. I'm thinking especially of John Cage, the 4 minutes and 33 seconds piece where the audience is like coughing and the sounds of the room become the
air
piece.
handling.
Right. And so I think the idea of rejecting closure can kind of meld the space between the time that the piece begins and the piece ends. And so thinking of that in the poetic context, it leaves the poem open not only for interpretation but also for its interaction with the world as reality not represented in the poem. So like Lynn Haginian coming back as a 45-year-old to add sentences, if closure weren't rejected at 37, then that would be less intuitive of a insertion. But
wow,
yeah.
Snaps for that guy. That was really great. So you're saying she does an addition at 37 sentences, and she turns 45. She adds to it, and if closure hadn't already been rejected in her thinking about the piece, what would that have been? Probably adding things that she remembered to the end or thinking chronologically about it. The piece continues to be rejecting closure. Before we turn to Erica, this is like a dumb show of hands, and I apologize for this question, but how many of you have ever been told that getting closure or gaining closure is a really good thing for you to do at any time in your life? Jonah, never? Okay. Can we say, hi, all the way in the back with the glasses, who are you? Yeah. Hey, you're the one. Hi, Patrick. Can you just, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, could you say why, in what context, roughly speaking? And what did it mean to get closure?
I've had it, for example, when I've left a job, that people insist on having a farewell party, even though I didn't want one, just because you're supposed to do it.
That was such a great example. Hold the mic for one more second. So what could have been gained by rejecting closure?
Well, I would have pissed everyone off if I had said no.
So that would have been lost, but what would have been gained by the rejection of closure? Ironically, you would have gotten closure, probably, like walking out the door.
I could have somehow given them all a philosophical lesson on how, the day after is no different than the day before, I just won't be there. But they chose to, you know, see that as a marker.
Thank you, Patrick. I mean, snaps for Patrick for handling that ridiculous question and coming up with a fabulously anodyne example of closure. So, Sophia, I'm putting you on the spot for a second. So now we take this idea that Patrick's experience was he didn't want closure, and closure was just a cliche. Now let's apply it to the kind of poetry you admire and a life. So her job is to write about a life, or to write a life, and what can be gained. Maybe you can tick off a few things that can be gained by rejecting standard notions of closure in telling of a life, which is usually chronological.
I feel like there's something to be said about, in our conversation yesterday when we were actually discussing chronic meanings, and this idea that we're dissatisfied with a line that doesn't finish, so to speak. It just leaves it up to our imagination to fill in this gap and to close this sentence, when really, like, the line is over. You go to the next line. So it's like this weird human impulse we have to put a salve on this dissonance. And I don't know if any life is ever really closed, or I don't like. There's always some question. There's always some relationship. There's always something that is this gash that will remain open, especially for those who experience it. So I think this presumption that we can manage closure or find closure within this litany of experiences kind of just makes us feel worse, right?
Has an unintended consequence. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Erica, we're going to turn to you, and the question becomes about, based on what Sophia just said about Lynn Haginian telling about her life. She doesn't want, clearly, to do it in a conventional way. And what is being discovered about the American culture that she grew up in, or about American girlhood, as a nascent feminist, let's just say, in the early chapters, what do we learn from this technique of hers about American values and about gendering in languaging? Those were a couple of easy questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's something that's a fundamental, stance or subversion against, like, the traditional genre of autobiography that she's staging purely through the conceit of the project or the intentional proceduralism of the project. So, she also uses familiar language. So she's painting these pictures, but then you get the paratactic impact of the sentences not quite doing what one expects sentences to be doing, as far as building towards a narration. And I think that maybe that's a way to think about what you're asking. I also can't help but think about Gertrude Stein's idea of the continuous present.
Yeah.
And how that feels really important to me, to this book. And the way that Stein thought about the continuous present in her mode of writing was also something that I think of as being a feminist gesture, where she is revealing information in her way that's completely new. And, it then becomes up to the reader to figure out a way into the form. And in Haginian's case, it's, the style of the writing is so different, and there's so much descriptive language to hang on to, but she's not going to give us a history lesson. So the way that we enter into the text happens in the spaces between juxtapositions.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Shantine, back to you. Emma, can we get them? Do you want to pick since you're on a roll here, you want to pick a poem and we'll talk about now?
Sure. Let me look at the list of things people have mentioned.
You were taking notes.
After you prompted me. I think we should talk about My Emily Dickinson.
Wow. Okay. So let's see. Why don't I ask Kate, Gabby, Jason, and Lainey to comment on this. And I think what we'll do is, if you don't mind, I'm going to find my text and quote a few lines, and maybe we'll respond to that. But I've got to find my text. Here it is. Here we go. All right, guys, here we go. Emily Dickinson and Gertrude Stein conducted a skillful and ironic investigation of patriarchal authority over literary history. Who polices questions of grammar, parts of speech, connection, and connotation? Whose order is shut inside the structure of a sentence? What inner articulation releases the coils and complications of saying's assertion? And saying is capitalized almost as if Emily Dickinson would have done it. Okay, so wow. Why don't we start with Kate? You want to respond to anything in there, Kate? You already spoke about this project, so you got a head start.
That's all right. I like considering it next to or just after my life, because, I don't know, they're sort of bookends to me. I think of my life as making plain how memory and consciousness are organized by language, and the orders that are present in them are determined by the orders inborn in language or innate in language, and or not innate as we are learning here. And Susan Howe is she's doing the same for historical currents and narratives. And certainly doing, the disorderly work that Heginian does as well in other parts of her work. But here she's really talking about how patriarchal languages, and especially syntactic relations and normative structures.
And the relation to Heginian is so clear there in the way you put it, because Lynn is saying that we are language, that socialization is a language thing, and that she is socialized to be a girl sipping Shirley Temples by wearing her Mary Janes, but we come away from that sentence thinking about those remarkable names for those things that girls wore then. And so she's learning her gender roles through the enforcing of certain phrases and idioms. And so what Susan Howe does is go back to Emily Dickinson, the mother of us all in terms of modern poetry, and sees how that's the way to read it. Very cool. Gabby, followed by Jason. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that really interests me about this book is that, it's somewhere between criticism and poetics, which is a weird line to do. But I think what's bringing those together is the kind of intimacy of a prolonged readership relationship. I think for us kind of book people, to more and less degrees, we have these kind of ongoing intimate relationships with people that possibly we've never met, whose work we just have some kind of relationship to. I think of my relationship to Eve Sedgwick or to Ashbery or something, where I'm reading through entire oeuvres and really taking it in at different points in my life and revisiting and blah, blah. And that's just a kind of intimacy that's a bit hard to describe. And I think this is a book that is clearly enabled by just a prolonged relationship of readership with somebody that, of course, Susan Howe never met, couldn't meet. And I just think there's something very honorable about that as its premise and as its heart.
And what does "my" mean in the title?
Well, I think it's that. I mean, I think it's that sort of the one I've lived with. But also I think it's something about that each author is kind of instantiated a little bit different by every reader. So she's saying not only here's my take on Emily Dickinson, but also here's what's come of my sitting with Emily Dickinson, with being with Emily Dickinson. And it's a bit of a sweet thing, it's saying my dear, my Gabby, my whatever. There's a kindness to it.
Yeah, what would my John Ashbery be if you wrote that for you? You started this. You mentioned this last week, but I think this is relevant because it's not only the Dickinson is giving her permission to do what she wants with literary history and literary theory, and poetry, obviously, but Emily Dickinson is also needing literary historical correction by the latter-day Dickinsonian. Right. And so that's a tough question to ask you about Ashbery because you haven't thought about it. But where would you go with that? Why is John's like some trees, which either is very, very shy and closeted, or the opposite of it? And that must be something you think about when you encounter John, who's from a different generation, let's just say.
Well, I do. I mean, I think his gay politics are interesting. I mean, I think when I would say like my Ashbery, I always kind of make this joke that like I'm a very critical-minded person. I like kind of reading things at a distance and not being like a fanboy about really much. But with Ashbery, I'm kind of like, I don't want to dive that far into it. I don't want anybody to explain it to me. I just want to sit with it. I just want to be like live with it and then go away from it. So I almost treat it more. I'm much nicer to it than all the other texts that I like to sort of poke at and break up. I sort of like treat it as if it's like sort of sacral in some way. And that's me being kind of like going easy on it a little bit because it sort of makes me happy in some sense. And that's a version of the my that's like totally non-interpretive, but it's just the kinds of things that we like to do. Yeah.
Yep, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Gabby. We're going to turn to Jason, and then Lainey's on deck in response to My Emily Dickinson.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm focused on passage 3, which is the passage about hesitation and stammering.
Let me just put that into the record, Jason. Pulling pieces of geometry, geology, alchemy, philosophy, politics, biography, biology, mythology, and philology from alien territory. A sheltered woman, sheltered in quotes, this is Dickinson, audaciously invented a new grammar grounded in humility and hesitation. Hesitate, from the Latin, meaning to stick, stammer, to hold back in doubt, have difficulty speaking. He may pause, but he must not hesitate, says Ruskin. Hesitation circled back and surrounded everyone in that confident age, 19th century, of aggressive industrial expansion and brutal empire building. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. And then the last sentence of it, or I want to finish it, the hesitation and separation. The Civil War had split America in two. He might pause, she hesitated. Sexual, racial, and geographical separation are at the heart of
definition.
Definition.
Yeah.
And and so clearly in that last sentence, definition is quite a negative thing. Definition.
It really is. Isn't that cool that definition is a negative?
Yeah, I love it. And
I know you do.
Yeah, and I think as someone who might occasionally stammer, I love this passage. And I also think it, in terms of, it opens up something in thinking about what the language poets are doing in relationship to temporality again, that they are, resisting a kind of capitalist notion of progressive time, of, progress, and they allow language to circle around on itself.
Yeah.
And so all of them are kind of working on, modes of hesitation as an ethic.
Yes, an ethic, a mode. So what are some antonyms? Do you want to play an antonym game for me? So with me? Sure. So like the opposite of what she's describing as hesitation is smooth, articulate. You go.
Complete.
Complete.
defined.
Closed as opposed to open.
Right. Sensible shoes.
Disciplinary as opposed to all those wacky disciplines that she borrowed from, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's nice. What's the opposite of collage? Because this is really a collage.
Right.
What's the opposite of collage? Stephanie, what's the opposite of collage? Non-collage, straightforward. Representation. The 19th century history. Non-collage. We don't do non-collage. I love this. Lainey, we're going to turn to you. I love this. Everybody's getting, in a way, very personal. Stephanie? Structured. Everybody's getting very personal about this. I mean, my Emily Dickinson is so important as a basis for this week. So, Lainey, you want to finish this? Non-finish this off for us, because then I want to turn to you a question you have about Erica Hunt. So, you'll be leading us in the next section. So maybe make a quick one of this.
All right. You asked about my Emily Dickinson, and it makes me. This is not. Can you hear me?
We're trying.
Okay.
Zach is doing
there it is.
There it is.
When you said that, I thought, well, I know from my geography. So, there's
She's
that.
even got her geography. This is Volcanoes Be in Sicily, right? I know from my geography something nearer here.
So when she said when Susan Howe writes whose order is shut inside the structure of a sentence, it's not Dickinson. And right before what Jason pointed to, she writes, she built a new poetic form from her fractured sense of being eternally on intellectual borders where confident masculine voices buzzed and alluring and inaccessible discourse. So there's a refusal there.
Yes.
And also an excavation of Emily Dickinson's intention, which forever changed my reading of Emily Dickinson.
Yeah. That's really cool. It really shouldn't go without saying that what Susan Howe did is effectively for a whole generation, particularly of women poets, but not only, to turn away from the mad woman in the attic mode of Emily Dickinson, which is perfectly respectable in its time as a way of dealing with what happened to Victorian women, and to turn toward a languaged Emily Dickinson, who was even more radical. Emma W., can you get Stephanie the mic? And then I want to turn to Erica Hunt. Not Erica herself, who's not here, but Lainey guiding us. Hi.
I just want to say, if you're going to ask what would mean, she says, what does my Emily Dickinson mean? She's certainly not unaware of what Emily means when she says, my Susan.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Yeah, for those of you who know the Emily Dickinson life and story, there you go. My Susan. Oh, man. Thank you for putting that into the record. Well, actually, Lainey, we're going to go to you in a minute, but we have someone on the phone. Someone called 610-616-3208 or Skyped and got through. Chris, who is it?
They did get through, and the long-distance call across the country. We have Leah J. calling in from
Leah.
Portland, Oregon, which is a place we got to go sometime, Al.
Oh.
Just throwing that
Leah,
out there.
can you hear me?
I can.
This is so cool. We're in New York. We schlepped all the way here so you could call us from Portland. I'm really confused. I haven't seen Jonah in 20 years. I don't know what's going on. I really don't know where I am. And you called. And you and Chris and Zach really like to go on the road for ModPo. And they just advocated for Portland. What do you think of that?
I'm urging everyone to come out.
Yeah, but
Perfect poetry town.
The question was even more specific than that. Do you think we could get enough ModPo people in Portland to justify the great expense of a ModPo team trip to Portland?
You could get a ton of people, I think.
Oh, okay. And Sophia is voting for coming with us. Okay, Sophia, wherever we go, we've been thinking about Edinburgh and Glasgow, but I think Portland might be cheaper. So, guys,
it would be.
Yeah. Leah, am I right that this is your first year in ModPo?
It is.
You're all over the place. You're a star. You're the rookie of the year, I think.
so use that.
How's it been going so far? It's a little odd, this adventure, this giant community of poetry people, yeah?
It is. It's very odd. I'm glad I am on this odd adventure.
That's great.
There's a lot of poems I don't understand and I don't get into, and I'm sure that I will get into them more with repeated, attendance to ModPo.
Yeah. Hey, Leah, I know you have a question that you want to ask, but I have one more thing to throw at you, which is this idea that ModPo is not like a course, 10 weeks. It is that. But nobody actually does it for 10 weeks and then walks away, because you can't do that for poetry. Those of us in the room, and there are many of us who live and breathe this poetry, we're constantly rereading it, constantly engaging with the actual people in it. We have a little Jerry Rothenberg in it, and then Rothenberg shows up. The people just to my right and left have been very engaged for many years with Bernadette Mayer, and the more you read Bernadette, you want to talk to her and all that stuff. And this is a living, breathing thing, and so why should a course be dead, if the poetry is so alive? This is a rhetorical question you don't have to answer.
And it's sort of the cyclical nature of the poem My Life, anyway.
Very cool. You're very good at this.
Yeah.
You got us around to the question or comment that you wanted to pose. Would you like to do that?
I was just talking to folks on the chat, the YouTube chat, about my life as poetry versus autobiography. Is it one? Is it the other? Is it both? I think when I read it first, I felt like it was a little bit like, here's an autobiography of this woman, and it's all disjointed. Why is it like this? What makes it poetry? I'm always with these spicy questions. I always want to challenge it and take it apart. And
I am
then I can maybe
so
get into it.
glad you asked this question, Leah. So glad.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to hang up and then listen to us on YouTube answer the question. And I really appreciate your calling, and I'm serious about Portland, so please let us know if there's some other Portland. What do we call people from Portland? Portlanders?
Yes.
Portlanders. If there are other Portlanders out there, please raise your voice, because Chris Martin wants to go there. Leah J., Rookie of the Year. Let's give her a big hand. Yay. Thank you, Leah. Okay. Amber Rose, Allie, Dave Poplar, and Leanne, the four of you, your job is to gamify this, and we'll go one around, and your job is to say what genre, because it's all the genres, so don't say, it's all the genres. Leah asked, in all sincerity, how did you generically or categorically approach it, maybe for the first time, or where does it settle for you? So let's start with Amber Rose. Hi, Amber Rose. How are you?
I'm preferring that question.
Okay, we're not going to ask you that question. However, there you are. It's late in the day, but you've joined us. Thank you. It's always good to see you. Do you want to try to figure out what kind of category or genre works for you when you think about my life?
Yeah, I think because I'm first, I'm gonna say poetry. And I think that what is productive about me categorizing it as poetry is that it allows me to really meet the text exactly where it is and sort of strip away any sort of pretense about how I think that the text is supposed to perform. Once I say that something is poetry, even if it looks like prose, even if it looks like essay or whatever, then I'm kind of like, well, we're off the handle, so anything can fly in these sentences. And then I'm kind of just going for the ride as opposed to moving forward from a certain expectation about how how the work should engage with me as a reader, like legally or not.
That's so cool. You may be tired and you may be grumpy for some unknown reason, but in fact, you are so good when you're in those moods. So I wish you more of those moods. I've just turned the tables on Amber Rose. No, you're the best. Thank you. That was a great way to start. In fact, Leanne, you're up next. If we were in that room at San Francisco State University in 1979, we would have heard her read and said to ourselves, I don't have the text in front of me. She's reading this for the first time. What is it? And the question is, what is it?
I just wanted to reiterate that first sentence. I'm not as familiar with this passage as some of the others, but I love that the obvious analogy is with music. I mean, it made me see it as a lyric poem even more strongly.
Or a musical composition.
Yeah, music. And it echoes that quote that Kate Colby pulled out about Stein, that the Susan Howe quote about the sound was what's important. And I mean, I'm a sonically geared poet myself, but what's great about this is it has, it brings music forward like a good lyric poem should, but this is language poetry, so it does all these other things too. And one of the main things, I think, it's that it's operating at the unit of the sentence. And that first sentence to me sounds like the music of a mountain creek. It was a mountain creek running over little pebbles of white quartz and mica.
Yeah.
And then I started to hear the whole thing is like each sentence being a rock, like a little pebble in a stream, and it was always changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like taking the William Jamesian idea of time, rolling along like a pebble in the creek, and actually making it poetry, unlike William James. I love that. That's really cool. Thank you. Let's turn to Dave Poplar. What category helps you manage this, Dave? In the
Short
spirit of
answer,
Leah's question.
My short answer would be autobiography. But my longer answer is just that this idea of categorizing it reminds me of the Bernstein poem I mentioned in particular, and the potential difficulties of using shortcuts like categories and stereotypes as an overlay.
Right.
I mean, here it can be a helpful device, like a cognitive shortcut. But it can also be limiting if we're thinking about it in a certain way. But that's
super helpful. I like autobiography too, but then you qualified your statement wonderfully. We're going to turn to Allie for a final shot at this question, but I wonder how many people in the room have taught my life to students. So I just think I found the best way to teach it is to say, have you read a memoir? Have you read an autobiography? Yeah. Have you read a woman's autobiography? Yeah. Have you read a coming-of-age book by an American girl become woman? Yeah. Okay. Read it this way and tell us how different this one is. So it's like, what would an experimental autobiography be like? And I find that very productive, and I like the spirit of Leah's question. Allie Castleman, what is your thought on this?
I don't mean to be like droll when I say this, but when I bought like My Life for 88.
For the course, when it was back in the day, when it was just a course.
For the brick and mortar course.
Yeah. You were in that course.
Yeah.
You were a student.
I approached that as a book object because it's small. You can kind of like fit it in a pocket. And it's called My Life, so that sets up a certain autobiographical or memoiristic expectation. But I do think that there's something really freeing, and especially we were talking about like non-closure, non-discipline, right?
Yeah.
About just opening a book and meeting it where it is. And I'm also drawn to the beginning of the section we read. The obvious analogy is music, because on the page, it's not, again, like paratextus comes in. It's not visually above. It's kind of like next to it in a corner, which kind of sets up this like equal sign.
Nice.
And so I think we here tend to think of that as poetry, a greater house than prose, but as someone who writes a lot of prose and thinks that prose is also full of possibility, whether that's fiction or nonfiction, I think it can kind of fit into any of those categories. So yeah, I just think of it as a really nice book that I want to get lost in.
Love it. And it is a book and was a book, and we should think about it as a book. Very cool. Any in our audience, our live audience here, favorite books that are absolutely generically wacky? You don't know what genre it is. Favorite books? Shout it out and we'll repeat it because you don't have a mic. Favorite books? Stevie, favorite book? What? I think J.D. Salinger. Salinger? Yeah. generically pretty stable, but yeah, okay. Ann Carson. Okay. I'm going to go wackier than that. Moby Dick is my favorite book, other than poems. And what the heck is Moby Dick? I mean, that's
Little sections.
a poem. A poem.
Tiny chapters.
You know, it's whale science as far as I can tell. What? It's an epic. It's all those things. Paradise Lost is probably very similar. I mean, it's an epic, but it's a lot of other stuff. Okay, so Lainey is going to introduce a question about Erica Hunt. Then I'm going to play a piece of the poem that Lainey has in mind that we should discuss. And I'm going to ask Amber Rose, Jake, Gabby, Kate, and Sophia, that's a lot of people, to respond to the question. So you'll have to do it efficiently, everybody. So Lainey, you want to ask the question, then I'll play the excerpt?
Yeah, so we're going to be listening to Erica Hunt's Broken English. And the question is, what is broken in this context of this poem?
Yeah. So the poem is Broken English. Lainey's asking us to say what does broken mean, or what is broken, and it's going to be to repeat Amber Rose, Jake, Gabby, Kate, and Sophia. And I'm going to do my best here to play. Chris, are you ready? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to play Erica Hunt, who read this at the writer's house. We took a video. I'm playing a video. You won't see the video, and we're going to try to do the best we can with the audio. And this is part of the poem.
Is wounded, re-wounded, rewound, rewinding, repeating, seeding, inscribing, inflicting, inserting, beating, and suffocating. The breathing, grieving, bulleted body, beating, and
Okay. The question is, what's broken? We start with Amber Rose.
Man, what's broken? That's a good question. Well, what's broken? I mean, she is literally breaking the words in her performance, sort of breaking them apart, breaking them down. But that's not what's driving the tone that we hear, and the heaviness that we hear. I think what's driving that is she is trying to break the language to show that what the language, like the reality that the language is populating and is constructing, is what is broken. And so she then is breaking the language sort of in response in order to make that brokenness clear. That's not super clear, but luckily there are a couple other folks that are going to come behind who are going to add on that. But that's a starting point.
That's super clear, I think.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amber Rose. This is a really good start. This is a tough one. And you've been thinking a lot about this, Amber Rose, because you're writing about Erica Hunt and brokenness.
Yeah, and writing about this particular poem, and that's why I shouldn't talk about poems that I'm actually writing about.
You were there in the room when she read this poem.
Yeah.
Can you recall your response?
sort of similar to the one I have now. There are some poems that make me feel like I don't want to theorize about them. I don't want to, I just want to receive them and their weight. Like they speak so much. Her breath, at one point she takes a breath and pauses as if the experience of reading the poem is taking her off guard and she's the poet. And to witness that kind of encounter where she is not just performing this breathlessness and this exhaustion, but it's really coming up out of her, is so profound and impactful. It makes me want to just sit in the words and in the space that their breaking creates.
In other words, it's poetry, and we as critics and respondents should back off and let the poem do the breathing, because our breath is going to be regular in our critical sentences anyway, right? No matter what you do, no matter how fabulous this part of your dissertation is, your first book, it's not going to be the breathing, because they won't let you pass the dissertation requirements if there's a bunch of breathing in the middle of the dissertation.
Even though that's probably what needs to be there.
Exactly, and that's what's so fucked up about our job, if I may, right? It's like, wait a minute, breath and precarity, it's not a Nate Mackey essay about breath and precarity, as great as that is. It's actually an example of precarity that is derived through understanding that words will suffocate us if we don't break them.
Right.
It's real. Oh, Jake, I know Jake had to leave. Are you still here, buddy?
Just for another few minutes.
All right, do you want to respond to this?
I can try. It's really hard. I'm definitely with Amber Rose here that I too find it difficult to theorize, almost the way that it's difficult to theorize a eulogy or something very, very personal that somebody is saying. It's hard to read on the page, but to hear the reading is very impactful and difficult to speak about. I had a question about the text that we have and this being different, and on our chat others noticed too, and I'm curious if it's a different version or if it's a variation or just like what was happening, or if it was rearranged somehow on the spot. Like I would be curious about that. And
I think there's a simple answer, Jake, which is that the book was already out, and she was reading from the book. So she was improvising and varying it in the performance, and that's amazing. That's what she was doing. Something like you might do.
I was wondering about. I mean, in that case, yet another thing that is broken is maybe a cycle of poetry being kind of like dead and on the page.
And dead and published and printed between, in a paperback, and she couldn't let that die. Yeah.
And it made so intense and powerful again through this encounter. And and then there is also this thing of people say broken English, somebody who doesn't know how to speak it.
That's right.
In a way that's not broken. That's the connotation very, very often. But here, it's really kind of a commentary on the cycle of breaking, of being broken, of re-breaking, and cycle of brokenness.
It's so much. I'm so glad that Lainey asked the question about broken, following this question about hesitation, stammer, in Dickinson. That's the theme of the day, the theme of the night here at the Morgan, right? I mean, not smooth, but broken. Respecting what's wrong. We've got Gabby, Kate, and Sophia on to talk about this, and then we're going to have our final word session. We're going to give a lot of people a chance to do that. There's some people who are catching an 8:30 train and will be dashing out right at 8, and I apologize for that. But other than that, I hope that you'll stay around for a little longer, and I'm planning on hanging out, and maybe even a few of us are going to go down the, I almost said road. We're in Manhattan. We're not going down the road. Maybe some of us will go out, for a glass of wine or something. So let's go to Gabby, Kate, and Sophia, and then do our round of final words. Gabby?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. I was just gonna say, I think like what's nice about this variation of the performance, which I don't think, like the effect I'm going to talk about, I don't think is particularly in the text itself, but she has that re thing in our audio. And I mean, what feels broken there is that there's like a repetition of something that shouldn't be repeating. I mean, there's a very literal sense that the re shouldn't be said again in the word to say the word correctly. But then there's also a sort of larger metaphorical sense of like a thing occurring twice when it should occur once or shouldn't occur at all. And that it's sort of like, I was just struck by memory of the we in It All Started in African.
Tracy Morris.
Which is coming up in a couple weeks. And in that one, the sort of like, it has a similar effect, though it's not as kind of literal about the re, but in the skip on the we, where she does a kind of like we, she does this like, this sort of like scariness about something having an afterlife, you know?
That's great. Thank you, Gabby. Kate and then Sophia.
Picking up on what Jake said about broken English, and it characterizing, someone who speaks English as a second language, hasn't yet picked up the fluidity of ready-made speech and coherent utterance. In this, she's kind of retroactively breaking English back down into its components. And she kind of renders it rubble. She pulls out the prefixes and the suffixes and the roots, and she breaks it all up.
I love that. I think we've lost Kate's sound. Kate, did you mute yourself accidentally?
I accidentally muted myself.
Okay.
Sorry about that. She at one point says, she speaks of restoring full-throated sound as in some-bodied. So she's sort of pulling the language apart and back into its sonic components that somebody who doesn't speak it fluidly might be working with first.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kate. Okay, we're going to turn to Sophia, and then Emma W., get ready, because we're going to do some final words, and people in the audience are going to get a chance. So.
I've always been struck by the letters that appear in this poem that are just on their own line. There's like Y, there's an S, there's a double S, and these like floating letters that can kind of be assigned to either the line before or after them. In the same way that I think the title, Broken English, can be assigned to the interior of the rules of this process or the exterior, what we bring to it, in much the same way that Amber Rose was talking about. The reader coming to this English, and it's like the systems in which we already operate in is the broken part, insofar as we believe this to be incomprehensible or ununderstandable, when really it's kind of this necessary Keynesian model for like social reorientation or rearrangement that would help these systems that make us feel like everything has to be uniform and universally understood for it to matter.
An implicit plug for week 9 in there somewhere, yes. Which is next week. Okay, so we're going to have final words. What we do at the end of each webcast is we give everybody a chance to say briefly some thought that they have about the conversation we had tonight, or maybe about an idea or a poem that didn't get discussed that they want to put into the record. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Amber Rose Johnson, and we'll have Leanne on deck for final words. And then I also want to maybe go to Lucas. You have to run in a second. We'll go to Lucas back there, Emma W., so we'll get him the mic. Amber Rose, followed by Leanne.
Yeah, so my final thought is a plug for another one of Erica's poems in ModPo Plus, which is Reader We Were Meant to Meet. One of my favorite poems, and its own kind of ars poetica, but one that I think uniquely talks about that moment of encounter between reader, author, and poem. And she just does such a beautiful job of sort of describing the desires of that encounter And so my plug is just for folks to spend a little time with that poem before moving on to
Such a good suggestion. Chris, can you handle it if I put it on for a second?
And
all right, here we go.
She just does such a beautiful job of sort of
I am
describing
clearly
repeating myself.
Yeah, I'm clearly, I'm somewhere I've got the thing open, so this isn't going to work. But maybe it stopped. Did you turn me down? Is that what happened?
Yeah, try again.
Okay.
Reader, we were meant to meet and not disappear in the dredging. The edited ledgers omit antiphonal groans. Reader, you were meant to be legible, even in the failure to communicate, your will to resist, snatching defeat from the jaws of easy victory. In the brackish backs.
Reader, you were meant to be legible. Love that. Thank you, Amber Rose. And now we turn to Leanne for a final thought. How are you? It was so good to see you tonight.
Thank you for letting me sit up at the table.
How did that feel? You didn't know that was going to happen.
I guess the final thought I have is just I love the permissions that language poetry opened, and that how so much of it evolved into the work that we're looking at now with people like Cecilia Vicuña and Julie Patton and Tracy Morris and people that do performance, and Erica Hunt, like the poem is like a score that is not set on the page, and that it evolves in performance, and that kind of impossibility to be contained in a book. And this sonic element is happening at the same time as deep, deep meaning. You know, how it's all melding together. I think that language poetry was fundamental to help explode those containers.
Yeah, and toward the beginning, we were quoting Susan Howe saying, I'd rather do sounding than, does anybody remember what it was? Meaning making or something like that, sounding. All right, let's turn to Lucas, followed by Erica.
Hi.
Hi, Lucas.
Hello. I guess.
How was your trip to New York?
It was good. I had a nice companion on the train.
Who was your companion?
William.
William. Okay.
It's pretty good. We had the same class, so we walked to the station out of class.
It's like a collegiate experience, except you're in the greatest city in the world now.
And I have to see William again tomorrow in this really interesting and yet crazy class.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on in that class?
Yeah. What's going on? Let me think. I'm just dwelling in that kind of space between autobiography and poetry, and how just if I'm categorizing something as autobiography, I feel like an autobiography feels like you're taking an interpretive lens on your past and trying to square it away. Whereas if I'm moving into poetry and thinking about it as poetry, it feels like all these twists and turns feel almost less interpretive and more leaving like less closed and almost more real in that sense, more real than the genre of autobiography. And
wow.
So that's what I'm stuck in.
Lucas, I think it is more real. I think Gertrude Stein really meant it when she said, what I'm doing is really realism. Not literary realism, but real. And I think that's what's going on here. That is very cool. Let's go to Erica. And let's have Jonah give a final word after Erica. Whatever Jonah wants to say. Hi, Erica.
Hi. So my final word is to just share something from Erica Hunt's amazing collection, Jump the Clock. At the end of the book, she has a note, and this is something that I think might be helpful as we go into week 9. So Erica Hunt writes, poetry as wager, as Joan Ritalik says, and as survival, as Audre Lorde reminds us, these poems were and are a rehearsal space for emancipated knowing, thinking, and feeling, the open space of hope that through invention and play lies a road to getting free. So I think that the emphasis on invention and play, and particularly with language where the stakes are very high, especially right now, is important for us to think. It might be a helpful hint once we enter into next week.
Fantastic. Thank you, Erica. I love the cheerleading for next week because It's a hard one for a lot of people. It's aleatory, chance-based, non-intentional, quasi-non-intentional. So some people find it weird. Not us, though. No, we're into it. Jonah, hey.
So this was really my first foray into ModPo because I didn't take ModPo.
You did not take English 88. What course did you take
So
with me?
I was in the Writers House Fellows Seminar.
You were, weren't you?
With a number of fellows who are no longer living.
Wait, 2002.
I think it might have been.
Ashbury
the
first time?
It was 03.
03 was Ashbury?
No, it was the late Susan Sontag.
Susan Sontag.
Walter Bernstein.
Walter Bernstein.
And Laurie Anderson.
And Laurie Anderson. Laurie's still with us.
Exactly.
That's an amazing group of people.
Well, I was looking at the full.
Susan Sontag put us through our paces.
I remember going to
so
a Passover
scared.
dinner with Susan Sontag. It was pretty intense.
I mean, it was amazing. And she said at the end of her stint, her time at the Writers' House, she said, we're not done yet. Who's got a car? And we drove her over to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. She said, I want to go to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It was a Tuesday. They were closed. So she said, well, open it. So it turned out that Blake Martin, who was the coordinator, the Sophia of that era, had a friend, an ex-boyfriend actually, who was at the museum, and they let it. Susan Sontag wants to go. So they opened it for us. I could do that too. You could do that too, if you had to. Anyway, Jonah, that was amazing.
It was, and this was. So I hope to be back, and if not next week, then a future week.
Yay, Jonah. Thank you so much. All right, so let's turn. I forgot to put someone on deck. Let's turn to Dave Poplar for a final word, followed by Jake, if he's still here. I don't think he is. Nope, not followed by Jake. Followed by Gabby.
I have to say, go Phillies, first off.
Okay. Can you cut him? Can we get him out of the Zoom?
But this actually leads to a point because leads to a way that
we're in New York, pal, and you're in Arizona, so this is wrong.
This course is based at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's a Philadelphia course. We root for Philadelphia teams. But what I wanted to say is this sort of relates to a way that ModPo has ruined me in a good way, because when I read the accounts of the Phillies' victories in the NLCS and their achievements going to the World Series and the arc of Bryce Harper's career, I'm just now so hypersensitive to how contrived these narratives are about it, because they are so contrived. Nothing is as inevitable as these descriptions and stories make it seem. I want to believe them. I love them. I eat them up. But I'm just now constantly sensitive to how all of this closure, all of this narrative, all of this consequential storytelling is just made up. And I'm grateful to ModPo for giving me that. But nonetheless, go Phillies.
Thank you for turning that around towards something serious.
Wide poetry, yes.
And you implicitly said that the whole narrative about Bryce Harper is bullshit. I think
didn't say
that's
it was
what you
bullshit.
implicitly, right? Isn't that like coming into his own, finally cashing in the value, et cetera?
Well, just because a narrative is overlaid on something doesn't mean it's bullshit. It's contrived to make it into that story, but it may have some truth to it.
All right, thanks, Dave. Thank you. The tech guys are both Phillies fans, so even if I wanted to cancel your Zoom appearance, they wouldn't do it. There would be a mutiny probably, right? Okay, correct. All right. We should do a live webcast at the stadium next year. And I have some connections down there. We could get the Fanatic. Do you imagine the Fanatic sitting in the audience having a final word? Okay, before we go to Gabby, Gabby's going to do final word next. I want to turn to Rachel DuRose. Can we get a mic to Rachel DuRose? By the way, this is Sophia's sister, Rachel, twin sister.
Yes. So this is also my first ModPo experience, which was really interesting, and I feel like I learned a lot about poetry in general, which is fun because it gives me an insight into my sister and what she does all day.
Because you've not really known until now what she does.
Well, I've known, but it's nice seeing her in action. So
She's pretty good, isn't she?
Yeah, she
Sophia
is.
DeRose, everybody. Sophia DeRose, another Rookie of the Year, I think.
But so I work as a journalist, and so the writing I do all day is you have to be very literal, and it has to be straightforward, and there's no room for interpretation. If someone's able to interpret something you say, you've probably written the article wrong. So it's fun coming to a space like this where it's kind of all about how the individual perceives it and the emotions it creates and the words create, and everyone has their own interpretations and ideas around everything. So
Great, thank you, Rachel. Will you I'm going to turn to Gabby next, but you hand the mic back to Stevie. And so Gabby's up next, followed by Stevie, followed by Kate.
It's so funny, Dave, because my final word was also going to be "Go Phillies." No, it wasn't. I'm just going to shout out. I want to shout out a poem that's not on the syllabus, but is one of my favorite poems ever, which is Charles Bernstein's "Before You Go," which is from Recalculating.
Very sad poem.
It's a brutally sad and very beautiful poem.
Do you have it in front of you?
I do, yeah, because
Okay.
it's online.
What I want you to do is hold that thought, because I want to return to you, but Sophia has to run and catch. It's ridiculous. Amtrak's last train to Philadelphia is now 8:30. I mean, we need to write a letter, because I think our taxes pay for Amtrak, don't they?
Come back. So.
Okay. I want to come back to you, Gabby. No, Sophia, get a final word, quick.
Okay. My final word would be I would love to write a version of my life in the Lynn Haginian way and have Rachel do one too, because I think they'd be dramatically different.
Oh, I don't know if that was an ouch or a blowing of a kiss. I can't really tell.
It was lovingly.
Okay. Thank you, Sophia. And yes, so the people catching the 8:30 are running out. Thank you. So sorry. Amtrak's doing this to us. I'm staying, though. Gabby, that poem, say again the name and then read a few lines. It is devastating. And then we'll turn to Kate for a final thought.
It's a hard one to read a few lines of, but it's called "Before You Go" by Charles Bernstein. It's actually all online because Susan B. and his wife, who's also an artist, made like a collaborative piece. So it's online. I'll just read a few of the opening
read a few lines. It's really sad.
But it's not obvious how it's sad. Okay, before you go. Thoughts inanimate, stumbled, spare before you go. Folded memories tinctured with despair before you go. Two lakes inside a jar before you go. Flame illumines fitful lie before you go. Furtive than morrow, nevering now before you go. Lacerating gap, stippled rain before you go. I'll stop there.
It's a really lovely poem, and it's fine, totally findable online. Charles Bernstein, "Before You Go." Let's go to Stevie and then Kate. Do you have the mic? The mic holder has gone, but we have the mic, so you're good. Yep. Hi, Stevie.
Hi.
How are you?
I am great
It's
because
so good
I'm here.
to see you. Congratulations on things that have happened in your life since the
thank
last
you.
time we saw each other.
Yep. I have known you for a while now. I'm getting older.
How many
You're
years?
not, which is
How many
crazy.
years?
I met you in 2011.
Okay. 11 years ago.
Yeah, wow. First of all, it's my first ModPo. I'm loving it. I think for me to just being in a space like this is very sacred. And you realize that when you're not in as many spaces like this anymore. And so I'm very happy to be here. And very happy to hear all of you. It's a very powerful collection of voices and thoughts. I'm struck by a lot of what we talked about today. In particular, the idea of the word broken and what we consider to be broken. Because if you hear and see our reactions, feels like that wasn't broken at all. So I thought that was particularly powerful to think about. But
That's a lovely thought, that by accepting the brokenness of the language, by admiring the way a poet can break language, it's like we're re-breaking it, unbreaking it. I don't know. There's no
Broken
healing.
has such a poor connotation.
Yeah.
But if you really think about breaking something down into the parts and what it is
Yes.
when it's broken, it's
Yes.
It's
So if
not
we take
necessarily
broken English and we combine it with Reader We Were Meant to Meet, we get this idea that Sid Corman is all about. It isn't for want of something to say, something to tell you, something you should know, but to detain you, keep you from going, feeling that feeling myself here as long as you are, that becomes the possibility of unbrokenness. Reader, we were meant to meet, so that if you blink, I might be missing something. That's what she says in that poem, which is another way of describing. Like I said, I'm not running for senator. I'm not running for governor. I'm not even running for teacher. I'm running for convener. And what a interpretive community is, which is ModPo, and is crazy and eclectic, is that the meeting that the readers, a whole bunch of readers we were meant to meet. Each poet was meant to meet that. And a living poet, such as Leanne Brown, must get such, even when the poems are devastating, must get so much heart at having readers get it and be there as readers. It's great.
You have to go do that fence reading.
Oh, yes, right. And we need to mend fences, too. Okay, let's turn to Kate Colby for a final thought. Hi, Kate.
Hi. I'll stick with the brokenness theme. I just wanted to shout out, I don't think we talked about Tyrone Williams at all. So
Not today, no.
Throw him into the mix. And I don't know, I'm looking at Kant because you mentioned Moby Dick earlier. And I love how he breaks up and piles up the detritus of historical narratives into something less untruthful. Almost in like a Charles Ivesy sort of way. He like stitches together or patches together pieces of these bad narratives.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Highly recommend Tyrone Williams. Okay, we have someone in the audience whose name I don't know, but I will in a second. Can we get a mic to her? And then we'll go to Allie and then Lainey for final thoughts.
Okay, so hi, I'm Hannah. This is my first time here.
Hi, Hannah.
Nice to meet you all.
How did you get here?
I took a subway from Brooklyn.
Oh, that was a literal answer.
Yeah.
How?
But how did I get here?
How did you
because,
find your way to
my
us?
mentor has been raving about this, so I have Jen to thank for that.
Hi, mentor Jen.
So I'm actually teaching a course now where my students and I are discussing what it means to speak quote-unquote broken English. And they're not poetry fans yet, but one of the things that we ask, when we read a text by someone who's learning English or, I guess, understanding what it is to communicate in English is asking, why are we calling it broken? Is there an intentionality behind the way that someone's communicating? And I think with poetry being such a flexible, form of communication, I don't think this poem, Broken English, is broken. I think that, if the author decided, if the poet decided to write it this way, then there's a message that's getting across, and the only thing that might be broken is if the reader decides not to engage with it.
That's beautiful. Can we put our hands together for that? That was so nice. Did you want to add something? Yeah. Hi.
I did. Hi, my name's Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
And this is not my first time in ModPo. I signed up for ModPo in March of 2020, which was an extremely broken time here.
You mean right when you got shut down and then you joined an online community?
I was actually, I worked in a residential psychiatric facility, so I went to work through the whole thing. But I was on 2 weeks where, once everybody was getting sick, I had 2 weeks before I went back that I was at home. And I think that's when I signed up.
Wow.
But I didn't really do the course until the fall when we were still not having a
Lockdown.
vaccine.
But you were back in
not,
the
I was
unit.
I was back every day.
Yeah,
every
that's-
day
wow.
with people every day, and I have to tell you that in that time, whether you were at home or whether you were like me going to work and then writing little essays and posting them
Yeah.
into the ether and then getting little responses,
Yeah.
poetry was really a place of refuge.
Yeah.
And so I had never even heard of a massive online open course
Yeah.
before ModPo. So I just want to
Mm.
thank you for creating that space
Wow, Sharon.
for all of us.
That's, fantastic. That we had a small part in. I mean, you were one of the people we were beating pots and pans about at the end of the day. I don't mean to dramatize it, but
I wasn't
that was,
in a.
I know, but you were
but it-
in a unit before vaccination with a lot of people who were being. I guess they couldn't be visited by anybody. So
Right.
imagine needing to be in a psychiatric facility and not having any visitors at the worst moment in your life, and you were the one there, and we were there for you. So secondarily, wow, I would say. I'm so glad that you said that. What's your last name?
Silber.
Oh,
And-
yeah, I recognize you from
yeah,
the forums.
I'm on the forums.
You
I
are.
didn't, while I was first taking it, I didn't even come to these things. I've only done
Yeah.
that this year.
Yeah.
But I felt like the Erica Hunt poem was really about the experience of brokenness that takes away language. That
Yeah.
was how it
Yeah.
felt.
That's, oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Sharon. Oh, it sounds like Elizabeth has something to say, but we're going to go to you next. Let's go to Allie, then Elizabeth, then Lainey, and we'll wrap up.
Going into week 9 with aleatory poetry, which is this is one of my favorite weeks. I just want to challenge Dave Poplar to write some sort of chance system poetry while he's watching the Phillies versus Astros in the during a World Series broadcast.
Dave, do you accept that challenge?
Baseball is the most stressful professional sport for me. I don't know if I'll be able to handle it.
I think it's probably very therapeutic for you to do that, Dave, and I think you should. I think you should only write an aleatory poem when the Phillies are losing. Look at him. Is Pep a fan, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, Pep and Joey, they like it. They put up with me. I mean, they get scared when I yell
Scream?
at the TV.
Okay.
Yeah. So they go through the roller coaster of emotions with me.
I have to tell you that I might watch some of these games, but I'm telling you, without a team that I care about in the World Series, it is the easiest thing to watch. I'm like, it's 0-0 in the 8th, but who cares? My heart rate is its usual 61, so.
But
Sorry.
you can't dislike this Phillies team.
Oh, yes, you
setting
can.
aside the contrivance of the narrative, it's a very likable team, and it's weird that a Philadelphia team is like America's team now, and we're totally uncomfortable with that. But it may be the case. So
Even that
You can-
shaggy guy in center field we're supposed to like?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, all right. That you just co-opted Allie's final thought, but thank you, Allie. All right, let's go to Lainey for final thought, and then Elizabeth. Let's go to Elizabeth first, and then Lainey. Hi, thank you so much.
Okay,
Zach,
this is-
how
Oh,
did you do that?
Oh my gosh.
This is Elizabeth's book. She just gave it to me. I don't know how clear the title is, but I'm going to say what the title is. It's a beautiful book. Oh, Zach's going to get the focus now.
Oh my. Oh, I'm really
How you
overcome.
feeling, Elizabeth?
Well,
There it is.
It's
They
really,
clasp my hand. They clasp my hand. Isn't that
Wow.
great? Congratulations, Elizabeth.
Thank
It's
you.
a lovely book. Yes. Hey, look at that. Huh? Wow.
Thank you, everyone.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, it's my first ModPo. But I really responded to the sound in broken English. To me, it sounds like a
Yeah.
really breaking sonically, not just with the breath, but also smashing things apart. And what interests me is that means again, really. So it's like again and again and again, things are broken or repeated or whatever.
Yeah.
And do we get it or don't we get it?
Poetry doesn't have to put it back together.
Right.
It can keep breaking it. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being part of ModPo. And now we'll turn for the final thought to the one and only coordinator of ModPo, a great poet who is going to be reading at the Kelly Writers House on November 9th. I'm so excited. November 9th. Those of you who are near Philly or can get to Philly, you need to come. Shantine, you're not that far away. You need to come November 9th. And the rest of you can watch, obviously, on YouTube. So that was a plug.
Thanks, Al.
Lainey, final thought?
My final thought is to shout out to take a look at Maymay Bersenberg's work. We didn't talk about her, but she's in this week. And I'll just read the first line from her poem, Concordance. Our conversation is a wing below my consciousness, like organization in blowing cloth, eddies of water, its order of light on film with no lens. Maymay Bersenberg.
Yeah, I love that. And that is in ModPo Plus. Thanks again to the people at the Morgan. Thank you so much, Chris and Zach. You schlepped all this spaghetti from Philadelphia and set it up here at the Morgan. And it is a miracle. You took a phone call. I don't know how you do it. Let's put our hands together for these people. Thank you, guys. For a while, I was watching, because I had the YouTube up on my iPad. I'm not sure why. And I was watching the comment stream. Sorry, chat, she made me say, the chat. And it was amazing. You people out there. And you managed to tame the Tinder bot. Somebody kept kicking out the Tinder bot. I think it was Sanjeev. Sanjeev has been kicking out the Tinder bot. And I think we finally mastered the Tinder bot. So, yeah, ModPo poet types, get rid of the Tinder bot. You got Tinder bot problems? Call the ModPo people. We'll get rid of your Tinder bot. I'm going to say Tinder bot all night.
Tinder buttons.
Tinder what?
Let's get Tinder buttons.
Oh, Tinder. If you're from the South, you might say Tinder buttons.
Yeah.
Tinder buttons.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You guys, and then of course all the people who came here tonight. We're so grateful for you to come, that you came. We're so grateful. Give yourselves a big hand, please. And so we'll see you week 9. We're back in Philly for the week 9 webcast. And so have a really good night, all of you, wherever you are. Leah J. in Portland, thank you so much for calling in from Portland, and we'll see you either in Portland or Edinburgh next year. All right, good night, everybody.